there are a lot of questions about what is going to happen to the Department of Education. A lot of questions about it. Now, Linda McMahon has been selected, and she's a fighter. She's tough as the Secretary of Education. But President Trump made a promise repeatedly on the campaign trail that eventually we're going to phase out the Department of Education. You see, the same way that we send power back to the states, education should be done state by state. We need to decentralize the way that we educate our children. Why do we have a Department of Education as it is? Well, it's interesting. The Department of Education actually was a splinter off of a program that actually was about health, education, and welfare. It was the HEW department, and they broke those into 3 different categories. Now, the U.S. Department of Education, get this. How much money do you think the U.S. Department of Education has every single year? What do you think their budget is? When you guys go through these numbers, it makes you just have shock and awe. The Department of Education, I want you to, without Googling it, I want you to guess what their budget is. Their budget is $238 billion a year. Said differently, our Department of Education budget is triple the Russian military budget. Our Department of Education has $240 billion a year. What results are we seeing from spending nearly $240 billion a year on education? Well, here's how it breaks down. So $28 billion of the budget was spent on Pell Grants. $23 billion is on the federal direct student loan program. So right there, Pell Grants and student loan program, send that over to the Department of Treasury. That does not need to be housed under the Department of Education. By the way, I think this is the old budget. I think this is all the way back from 2015, for the record. I'm just looking at this. The new budget, though, of fiscal year 2024 is $238 billion. So those numbers are even bigger. Yet our education is ranked so low across the world. We spend more on education than any other country. Where does all this money go? It goes towards paper shuffling bureaucrats and desk workers and subsidizing failed educational programs. In the Department of Education has the Office of Civil Rights, the Office of Educational Technology. They have the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Office of English Language Acquisition, the Office of Post-Secondary Education. $127 million was spent just studying and countering COVID-related speech. And so I would love to see if the Department of Education could undergo any sort of audit. So there's about 5,000 people that work for the Department of Education, and it has a $238 billion budget. Has anyone thought to ask, has any Senate Republican decided to say, why are we spending all of this money on this monolith, on this Leviathan? Educational outputs have gone down dramatically. We have entire schools in the city of Baltimore where kids literally cannot read. We have dozens of schools where kids cannot read at grade level. And so you would have to ask the question, why is it that the Department of Education exists in the first place? Obviously, we're all very, very pro-education. But is it a protection racket for the current college cartel? Are kids pursuing goodness, truth, and beauty? Are they learning about the deeper things? Are they studying the classics? Do they understand rhetoric and dialogue? How many kids can actually, if you lock them in a room without internet connection, can write a 4-paragraph essay? How many? No, instead, we should send it back to the parents. We should send it back to the local level, send it back to the states, and different states will do it differently. The federal government has no business whatsoever being in the education of our children, and here is why. Education is the most personal of all the things, because education goes all the way down to the development of the soul of the child. It goes down to the development of the character, which literally comes from a Greek word which means tattoo, of the student. The only effect the Department of Education has had is to inflate costs completely across the board. Not to mention, they come in and allow men in women's locker rooms. Not to mention, they come in and push critical race theory. It is a top-down edict and directive with tens of billions of dollars into your local school district. And have you seen your schools rapidly improve? So this was always the argument of the educational cartel, the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers. We just have to spend more money and our kids will do better. So the budget for the Department of Education in 2011 was $70 billion. That was 13 years ago. Now it's $240 billion. So it's gone up by nearly 3.5 times. So the Department of Education has nearly tripled in size. The Department of Education has tripled in size in the last 13 years. And are we seeing more kids proficient in math, understanding of core topics, who love their country, that have civic literacy? Of course not. Meanwhile, we went from number 1 in education to the 25th in education. How's that for an ROI? So where is this money going? And no one can ever answer that question. Well, it goes to Pell Grants and federal student loans. We should stop taxpayer subsidizing of student loans, by the way. We should put it back in the private markets. If you want to go study North African lesbian poetry, then you are going to have to go justify to some banker why the bank should underwrite your loan. But if you want to study engineering, if you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, well, then the bank can make a good argument. Okay, we'll give you a 5% interest rate. And when Doge comes a-knocking, and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy start asking the obvious question, what do you do here? What do you do here? The Department of Education, run by Miguel Cardona, has been one of the most bloated, fastest growing bureaucracies over the last couple of years. And if you look even a little bit deeper into the Department of Education, just a little bit, if you count Pell Grants, Title I, work assistance, and all the other affiliated cabinet on just grants, according to this article, it is $237 billion just on that. Now, what we need Congress to do is to reauthorize the Presidential Reorganization Act and break apart the Department of Education if there's duplicative type measures. And as Ronald Reagan has said, the most terrifying words from the government are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. The government, the federal government, should have no role in your kids' education. It should start with parents, community, school boards, localities, and if necessary, state. The federal government has failed miserably in this regard. It needs to be deleted, broken apart, and brought back to the ultimate micro, the development of a child's soul, character, and values. The U.S. spends more per pupil than most developed nations, including many that score on better and wonderful.